Hello there, welcome to Technique Tuesday. My name is Ali Board and I'm here today to take you through some of the less fun aspects of art, but possibly one of the most important too. Today we are going to be talking about the formal elements of art. Now, this isn't something that I teach every day of the week in terms of it being under that title. Every aspect of what we're going to be talking about today is something that is included in my tuition somewhere. It's just that I don't necessarily flag it as a formal element because it can be quite dull and it can be quite boring. So why have I made it my theme of the month this month? I have done so to kind of bring your attention to it, to be able to kind of convey to you where it occurs in a painting and how it is a fabulous tool for you being able to assess your paintings. So maybe there's something missing. Maybe, as a lot of you often say to me, you go, there's something wrong with it, Ali, but I'm not sure what that is. And so we use the formal elements of art and design as a framework to understand our paintings better. Now, this is a live broadcast. I'm currently broadcasting live from my studio in Dorset on the south coast of the UK. And I can see that there's lots of people who have popped up into the virtual room. So good morning to all of you there. Do pop. I have a feeling, I have a sneaking suspicion that there will be questions this morning. So please don't be afraid. Stick them in the chat. There are no bad questions. There are no daft questions. There are no silly questions. There's nothing like that. The only question that is ever a problem is the one that doesn't get asked. So stick them in the chat. And it looks like we've got all sorts of people popping up this morning. Thank you very much for taking the time to tune in. Now, I don't know if you like to take notes about these things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an overview of what the formal elements of art and design are. And then I'm going to take you through some of my paintings to show examples of them. Some of them are kind of rounded, really completed paintings. Some of them are things that I have experimented with so that you can just see what it is that I'm talking about. Now, I've had to make myself a cheat sheet because there are 7, sometimes 8 formal elements of art and design, and I always, when I'm talking about them, forget one of them. So I'm not going to lie to you, I've got a little post-it note next to the camera that I'm looking at now with the list on there. So here we go. There'll be words that you have heard before, but they are quite hard to quantify. So let me help you with those things. So here are the formal elements of art and design. So they are line, shape, form, tone, which is sometimes called value as well, texture, colour, what's the other one? Space, that's the other one. I've written shape twice. I mean, even my cheat sheet isn't helping. Space is the other one. And then because I call it art and design, because there's kind of crossovers, aren't there? There's fine art, which is painting and drawing and things, and there's design, which can sometimes be illustration. So just occasionally we tack one on the end, which is pattern. So to go through those, oh, Roger, thank you so much. Roger just put the loveliest post on the chat. Thank you for that. So they're line, shape, form, tone, texture, colour, space, and pattern sometimes. And what I'd like you to do is to take you to my overhead camera. I will show you some paintings where we can talk about them. I can give you a bit more information, and then hopefully you can understand your own work a little bit more. It's not the most exciting of demonstrations. I absolutely understand that, but it is really important for you understanding what's missing in your work. Or maybe you're an abstract painter and you need a framework to build other things around. So here we start. I'm going to go through them one by one. And also the other thing for you to understand is that one cannot exist without the other. So it's very difficult to have just one of those formal elements without something else creeping in, particularly in my work. There'll be people that argue with that opinion, but you can't, in a completed painting like this, have one without the other. So let's talk about line first, and I've got some examples here. These are some pictures that you may have seen before, you may have created with me recently, but they are a good example of line. So what is it when we talk about line? We're talking about a continuous mark made by a moving point. So that could be a pencil, that could be a brush, it could be a stick, a twig, a piece of charcoal, any of those kind of things. And why does it matter? A line matters because it creates structure, it creates movement, it creates direction, both actually and metaphorically, like this one. And line is also important because it can be an expression. So if we have a look at this robin in the close-up, many of you will know that I have my own particular handwriting, my own particular style of creating line. And you can see it here. We've got the Morse code technique, that kind of dot dash, bit of cross-hatching here, all of those kind of things. And when we talk about line, it's used to show kind of outlines, contours. It can be something like this, which is a continuous line drawing where you don't take your pen or your pencil or your ink or whatever it is off the surface. So it can be used to show kind of energy or rhythm or emotion, all of those kind of things. And so when we talk about line, we talk about how we put it down as well. So it might be directional. So things like my New York sign here, because I needed a direction for things to look like they're in perspective. Sometimes we might talk about expressive lines. So those lines like my continuous drawing, where they're kind of scrappy. And they might be used for a gesture to describe something like the feathers on a robin. So that is line. Now we can't really talk about line without talking about shape as well, because when we use a line, what it does is often describe a shape. Now, what is a shape? That's a really tough one, isn't it? A shape is kind of, how would I describe it? Like a two-dimensional thing. It's a flat area, an enclosed area. Why does it matter? Well, I think that's a kind of given. It matters because it builds structure. It builds composition. It gives you the overall contour or shape of the things that you are trying to describe. Now, it can be geometric in terms of using things like squares or circles or rectangles or triangles. It can be more organic, so more natural forms like my leaf here. And when we talk about shape, we talk about things like flat or silhouette, and we use line to describe those shapes. Do stop me if any of this isn't making sense, because it is quite a lot to take in. Now, what else have we got? Let's just clear the decks a little bit. I may come back to some of those, but let's kind of crack on with shape. From shape, we kind of move really quite naturally onto form. Now, what do we mean by form? Form is effectively a shape that has depth. Okay, so like here, for example, let's get this into a close-up so you can see what I mean. Here I have my little apple study. So I used a line to describe the structure. I used shape to make it look like the thing that I was trying to describe. And I've used form to make that shape three-dimensional. And so very often, particularly when you're using a pencil or paint, we're using things like shading, structure, perspective, all of those kind of things. And what does a form do? It creates realism. It also, the thing that we don't talk about, it's not a word that I use very often, it is used to describe volume. So that would be depth, a physical presence of that object. So you can see my apple here. If I just drawn a line, it would be more of a shape and a structure, but I've used form to make that structure three-dimensional, okay? We'll come back to some other elements of this as well. So we're talking about the kind of the volume of it, the mass of it, how solid it is, all of those kind of things. Now, I don't really think you can have form without having tone. Let's go back to the other camera. Now, tone. Now, this is a really tough one. This is something that people struggle with all the time. It is also sometimes called value. And I do think that occasionally value is a better way of describing what we're talking about than the word tone, because we chuck the word tone around kind of willy-nilly. We say, oh, our tones are out, or I'm trying to get a good tone with it. But I think value kind of sums it up a little better. So what do we mean when we talk about tone and value? We're talking about how light something is, or how dark something is, and the range in between those 2 points. Now, why does it matter? Of course it matters, because it creates depth, it creates contrast. You can see here, I've used it to describe the feet in the shoes. I've used it to describe the way the fabric forms around the shoe. But one of the things, and one of the reasons it is so important in my work, is because it also has the capacity to create atmosphere. And so here, this piece would be very different if I hadn't used very, very rich tones, very rich values to describe the shadows, because that is what is giving the atmosphere to the piece. Now, there's loads of kind of words that get bandied around with tone, aren't they? Like highlights, midtones, shadows, contrast, all of those kind of things. But effectively, what we're saying is we're going from the lightest area to the darkest area. Now, if you are a watercolorist, you'll be nodding right now, because the safe part of watercolor is in the mid-tones, and people find it very easy to find their mid-tones. So by mid-tones, I would be talking about something in kind of this area here, where it's not too light and it's not too dark. Generally speaking, those people that I teach really struggle to get the very deepest values in, the very darkest of tones. But that's where the sweet spot is. That's where, if you're a little bit brave, you'll be able to create paintings that have a lot more atmosphere in them. Now, in my work, whilst tone and value is really important, there are two other aspects of my work that are astonishingly important to me. There's no real hierarchy with these formal elements. One can't exist without the other. One is not more important than the other, but there are going to be elements that you are going to gravitate towards. Now, the first one for me is texture. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean actual texture, like a physical texture. It can also be a visual texture, like the illusion of texture, like I've got here. If we look at this in the close-up, you will see that there's no texture on it at all. If I hold it across, look, a dead flat, you can also see, look at the painting that's coming next. A dead flat piece of paper there. There's no physical texture on there. What there is a visual texture. Now, we are talking about a surface quality here. Things that we have used to create a texture. Here I've used some Lego and some bubble wrap and some packing materials. Now, why does it matter? And why is it so important to me? Because it adds that sort of sensory interest. It adds a way of me being able to describe the thing that I am trying to paint in unusual ways. It can also, of course, be used for realism. So if, for example, as I happen to have one here, we were trying to describe maybe a creature. Now, I've got two versions here, because which are sort of most of the work that I've got to show you now uses texture as part of it. So if I wanted to describe the coat of a tiger, or the fur or something that really made it feel like you could reach out, touch it, stroke it, poke it, whatever it is. I need to find ways of replicating that texture. So that could be with the marks that I make, with the lines. It could be with the shapes. It could be with my tones and my values, like here. I've got these very kind of dark tones in here, and I've got my white lines to describe the texture. So all of those elements are working together to provide a sort of realism or to add a visual texture to my piece. Now it's a coincidence that this is another big cat, but it's also a very good illustration of where texture can be used to great effect. So obviously we have a leopard here, and I've used a variety of brush marks to describe the coat, but I've also tried to play around with the texture in the background of my piece as well, to give that kind of dynamic quality, to give, like I said, that sort of sensory interest. I'm going for realism from the point of view that I want it to look like a cat, but I'm also drawing on other things as well. I'm looking at shapes, I'm looking at forms. I've got my very darkest darks and my lightest lights. All of these things starting to come together to work in the best way that they can. Now, as well as texture, you have colour. Now, when we talk about colour, I think we kind of all know what we mean. This obviously has all sorts of other things going on in it as well. It's a bit of a culmination of some of the things that we've talked about so far. But when we talk about colour, we talk about that word hue, H-U-E. We talk about brightness of colour. We talk about how colours work together in harmony, or that they kind of clash with each other. And we can use those elements, both deliberate and serendipitous, to form our artwork. Now, why does colour matter? For me, colour right at the top of the list of importance, along with texture, because for me it either describes the actual object as well as it possibly can, or it has an emotional attachment to it. You will all know that I use a lot of violet in my work, because that colour, it's not just about it being my favourite colour. It is a lot deeper than that. It has a symbolism, it has a meaning, and it has a focus to it as well. And there's lots of ideas with colour. We're going to explore many of these in my tutorials this month. We're talking about warm versus cool. We're talking about limited palettes. We're talking about bold colours. We're going to bring some of those things together. And in this little preparatory sketch, you can also see some of the other elements there too. We've got some texture, we've got some line, we've got some atmosphere in our tones. Now, this version is quite an unusual tutorial for me. You may have seen this on my TikTok or on my YouTube shorts, or maybe you were an All Aboard artist member when we tackled New York. And this is using colour for real impact and brightness. So I'm using acrylic markers here to really kind of make things pop off the page. I'm just going to deviate ever so slightly. Bless you, Lisa. Thank you so much for taking the time to pop in. And your words are very kind. You are a gem, an absolute gem. And I do hope that you're well. So just to get back to this, can you see I've used line in this because I am describing something with a mark that I've made. I'm also using shape, because I've got that kind of, I've got a bit of geometric shape going on. I'm using perspective, so I'm looking at that in form. I'm using tone, so I've got my kind of darkest bit of paper. I've got my very bright highlights too. I'm using texture. This is a little bit of pastel here in the background to kind of describe the softness of the windows in the city. And I'm using colour as well. So can you see how, whilst you might not realise it in a painting, all of those elements come together to start to describe your work And when you can get some interesting balances between them, maybe it's a kind of like an off balance, something kind of really bright and really dull, or maybe you're pushing the boundaries of those formal elements to be able to make a kind of atmosphere to your work. But this is quite a good illustration of everything coming together. Now, the last couple of things that I want to talk about today are space and pattern. Now, like I said, pattern is always optional, but it does work quite well. We'll talk about pattern a little bit in a minute, but let's talk about space. Now, I talk a lot about space in my classes, both positive space. So if we were talking about a positive space, let's get this back. I would be talking about these Chinese lanterns here. So that is my kind of positive space because I'm trying to describe that plant. But I talk a lot about negative space as well. And negative space are those shapes in between things, the shapes that are between the actual object to make them pop forward, disappear back, whatever it is. And this is quite a good illustration here. Let me show you that in close up. So I've looked at, in this, I've looked at colour, I've looked at texture. Those things are very evident in some of the marks that I have been making here. But I've also really tried to address space. So what I've done is I've kind of made some shapes to describe spaces so that when you look at this from a little bit further away, those spaces inform the idea that there are some trees here. We've got another example. A lot of these are not particularly finished, by the way. They're things that I pulled out of the archive so that I could illustrate what I was talking about today. So we've got some oak leaves here, and I've used tone, a very deep, rich, dark value in between my leaves to describe the spaces in between so that the shape of my leaves pops forward. Now, space, I think, is as equally important as something like texture because it does help you to balance your pictures. And like I said, we've talked about positive space, which would be the leaves themselves. And we've got negative space, which are the shapes in between. And it's those things that describe depth, they describe distance, they describe layering, all of that kind of stuff. Now, let's just recap. The main 7 that we've talked about are line, shape, form, tonal value, texture, colour, and space. Now, there's one more. Now, because I am an art and design teacher, I usually include it because it is as important to fine art as it is to design. And when I talk about design, I talk about things like what would you class as a designer? Somebody in fashion or textiles or jewellery or any of those kind of forms of creativity. And it's incredibly important to them because it really has an effect. It is a factor in that work. And that, of course, is pattern. But pattern can affect us as painters too. And I've got this zebra as an example. We could talk about this in terms of line. We could talk about it in terms of shape. We could also talk about it in terms of space because we are looking at both positive and negative spaces here. But we can't really talk about a zebra unless we talk about pattern, about that idea that in their coat you have a very recognisable pattern in order to describe the creature. We've got the same thing going here, haven't we, in the leopard, that there is a pattern to these shapes. We are trying to make it look realistic, and so that pattern really matters. Now, pattern is also, I've pulled this one out of the archive. I found this painting the other day and I've been using it a lot in my tutorials because it kind of pulls together all sorts of things, but it also includes pattern because of the nature of the subject. So I thought I would use this painting, this really is proper out in the archives, to kind of help you through in just like a final sweep of discussing those formal elements of art and why they're so important. Now, to me, a painting's never finished. To me, a painting is never the best thing that I have ever done. So I look at this now and I can see things that I would change. It's not that they're wrong. We have to get away from this idea that we've made kind of an error. It's fine to make a mistake. It's absolutely fine to make a mistake. It should be as important to make a mistake in your work as it is to have something that you deem as a success. Because if you don't make mistakes, then your work doesn't progress. You can't push it on further. So I keep all of my old paintings so that I can go back and I can think to myself, oh, my work has changed because I don't do this anymore. Or, oh gosh, I'd completely forgotten about that element of art. And that's something that I want to replicate. So this kind of work, this going back through the archive, using that framework of the formal elements is really important, and I encourage you to do it as well. But let's just have like a little final huzzah on this piece of this painting so that we can see what it is we've been talking about with those formal elements. So if we were talking about line, that kind of continuous mark made by a moving point that creates structure, all of those kind of things, this piece is littered with them, littered with lines. We've got lines that describe various parts of this Venetian costume and the mask. We've got lines that describe the jewellery. We've got lines that describe the body of the person. And they are, of course, creating shapes, not just in the pattern, there's that word, around the Venetian mask, but the mask, the actual hat, all of those kind of things. If we're looking at form, then that is obviously a shape with depth. So we're looking at tone in that as well. We've got shadow areas in here. We've got lighter areas. I was trying to make this mask look like it was wrapped around the face. And so I need to create volume and depth with the shapes that I'm making, with the form that I'm trying to create, and also my tones so that I have the lightest lights and the darkest darks. Now, I think it is very obvious with this piece as well, things that are important to me, like I was saying about texture and colour. So we've got a lot of collage on here as well. And obviously I have chosen colours to describe this character because they have an emotional connection, or they are important, or they work in harmony with each other. So I've got blues in my background. I've got rich, deep violets and bright, zingy yellows to give that kind of sense of occasion, of spectacle, all those types of things. But in terms of space as well, look here, in order to describe how bright this is, I've used my value and I've used the space underneath to make that pop out. But of course, this one has also got pattern as well because of the nature of the subject. Look at the lines and the marks that I've made on the earrings and in the jewellery, and the way that I have used that particular jewellery to describe the whole. Now, if this piece was lacking in something or missing something, or maybe it was overpainted, then I could return to my formal elements to be able to assess what was wrong. And this is the thing that I urge you to do. Pull a painting out of the archive. Could be something that you've done long ago. It could be something that you did last week. And go through those formal elements in turn. You don't have to have all of them in a picture. It is perfectly possible, for example, if, let me just find it, I've cast it aside and now I need it back again. Here's that lovely little simple apple study. It is devoid of colour. You don't have to have colour in everything, but it is an interesting framework to go, have I got my shapes right? Or have I got my tones correct? Or is there too much texture and actually I need to knock it back a little bit? Or maybe it's just not speaking to me because the colours on it don't really have a connection either with the actual subject or with the artist themselves. And so those formal elements suddenly become incredibly important. There'll be things that you already know. None of this is going to be news to you. There'll be things that you have thought about in your work. There'll be things that you have discussed. There'll be words that you have heard bandied about by people like myself to try to analyse what we are doing. Now, another caveat with this, of course, is don't over-analyse. Don't sit there like a checklist going, oh, well, it's got pattern and it's got shape. That will just translate into your work as being a bit cold and a bit clinical. What I'm suggesting is that you have this little list so that if something's not working or something is overworking or you've poked it around and you can't see the wood for the trees anymore, then maybe this list of formal elements is something that would be helpful to you. Now, I just want to give a massive shout out to everybody in the room, particularly a certain Mr. T who has said good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you also for all of your very, very kind words about the paintings that I shared. I didn't expect that this morning. I was just digging through going, oh yes, this is a really good illustration of pattern or line or whatever it was. So I hope as well that you have enjoyed watching, not only to understand those things a bit better, but also to see a bit more of my work. I certainly enjoyed digging these things out to be able to share them with you. Now, I've got lots of tutorials lined up this month. We've got all sorts going on. We did music last month. This month, I have gone to town with collage and ink and things drawn from all aspects of art so that we can use the tutorials to describe them more. Don't forget, if you want any information about any of those tutorials, you're very welcome to go over to my website, learningtopaint.co.uk. And of course, you're also very welcome to drop me an email anytime, Ali, A-L-I, at learningtopaint.co.uk. Now, if you have any questions about anything that I have talked about or you're still not quite sure, I would love to hear from you. But until we meet again next time, there's another Technique Tuesday coming up next month where my theme is miniature, with some real parameters on that, but I'll tell you more about that when I see you next. But hopefully, if I see you in person, online, or we just pass and we get to chat about a little bit of art, what's not to love about that? So take care of yourselves, won't you? And I will see you very soon. Bye, lovely people. Bye.